sure healthy things grow. Yes, they do, but weeds also grow, and they grow really fast.
This is the Church Growth Nation podcast.
What's up, everybody? This is Ross Turner and my man Josh Mayo in Atlanta. This is Church Growth Nation. We're talking with Josh today about his church. And Cross Church is a great church in Atlanta. We've been buddies for a while. And I just wanted everybody to connect with Josh, hear their story, learn about the church, kind of talk about culture. And I hope you guys glean from this. What's up, Josh? How hot is it in Atlanta, Georgia today?
Not as hot as it is in LA. So we're doing good right now. It's a little bit cooler today. It's normally hot Atlanta, though.
Yeah, by the time this episode airs, I will either be super happy or super sad because tonight is Game 5 of the NLDS with the Dodgers playing Washington, and I am going to either be really sad or really happy. So
I'm praying you're really happy, except for until you play the Braves, and then we crush you. That's what I'm going for. This
is how non-fan you are. You don't even know that the Braves are not even playing anymore,
no.
So you can't even talk trash.
It really happened. Last night was Game 5.
Yeah.
Stink. I thought we had one more shot.
No, it's gone. And my brother is a Minnesota Twins fan, and he started trash talking me Game 1, and they're playing the Yankees, and they got swept. So I enjoyed that conversation with him.
Yes, that sounds good.
Yeah. So tell me about Cross Church. I know that you planted the church. How long have you guys been going on? How did you plant? Did you go on your own? Did you use something like ARC? Just kind of give us the story of the church.
Yeah, absolutely. So we planted about 6 years ago as a new startup church kind of thing, not really a campus or a satellite, but we got training through the ARC. We love the ARC. Some of my closest friends are ARC pastors and whatnot, and we are associated with ARC, but didn't receive any of the funds there, but definitely had the relationship there and some great training, and we're just having a lot of fun. A lot of fun just loving our community in North Georgia and trying to make heaven a little bit more crowded.
Did you start in a building? Did you start in a school? What was the process like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, boy, when we started out, we looked at, I don't know, it took us about 8 months to secure our location, which that was a beast. We ended up starting in a school, was there for about 4 years, set up, tear down. We couldn't leave anything. So the only thing that was there that we didn't have to set up was chairs because those were bolted to the ground. So it was a performing arts theater kind of thing. And it was a lot of work. We couldn't store anything on site. Everything had to be drawn in by trailer every single week. It was pretty exhausting. And we had 2 setup days, Saturday and Sunday, because they wouldn't let us into the main room until Sunday morning, but they would let us into the kids' rooms on Saturday. So it was we were portable, and I didn't know that when God asked me to start a church, I was actually starting a moving company, but that's kind of what it felt like.
Yeah. How many months or years were you doing that Saturday, Sunday thing?
Yeah, 4 years. 4 years. And man, I'll tell you what, the saints of the church were the people that set up and tore down, and they're pretty awesome.
What's the facility like?
Those people. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
What's your building like now? I mean, I know you have your own facility. Where are you at? I mean, do you own it? Are you still some portable? Do you have 1 campus, 2 campuses? What's the story?
Yeah. So we're a 1-campus church, and we're having a lot of fun. 5.5 years in, kind of a thing, and we own our building. The day we started, 5.5 years ago, we started putting money aside for us to be able to step in and make a purchase. Just believing that as we worked on small margins that God would be able to help us take that next step. And when a building basically came open, the first building that ever came open for us, we had been searching from day one, and it took about 4+ years for us to find a place. And when we did, we announced to our church that we were, the first time we ever talked to the church about it, we announced that we were in contract to purchase a building, that we had a large down payment for the building, and here's the giving plan for us to be able to finalize the building. And so it was a pretty exciting day because no one even knew what we were doing till we just did it, and people really got behind it. And So we've already got most of our building paid off by the grace of God.
That's awesome. Tell when you guys decided to start the church, you went with Cross Church, and it's not like Cross Jesus Church. It's like Crossroads almost. Like what's the branding about?
Yeah. So what we like to say is the cross of Christ helps you to cross from your pain to your purpose. You see right behind me, find life. It's this idea of, that's our branding behind us. You kind of see our logo and stuff, and it's the idea of, kind of like the Israelites going from, Egypt into the promised land, that the cross helps you to cross into new life, helps you find life through Christ, relationship with Christ and relationship with others. And that's really our purpose, is to help you find life. And so that whole branding thing is, you see the flag as well too. It's like we're taking new ground, because whenever you take a new ground, what do? You plant a flag. And so it's this idea of continuing to move towards what God has for you.
Who was your first hire?
Yeah, great question. Our first hire was actually a husband and a wife combo, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. He ran the worship and still does. And she ran our youth and children's ministry and still does. They're phenomenal. And we basically stipend them at the very beginning. And I won't tell you how much we stipend them, because it was very embarrassing. But they were very gracious. And they're some of the best people that we have in our church. Alistair and Gianna Wild, they're rock stars.
Yeah. From the moment, if you're comfortable with this question, from the moment you planted the church until now, what do you think that, if you could pinpoint one, is one of the biggest mistakes you've made so far as a pastor?
I made a lot of them. Which one? I think one mistake that I did early on was I put too much pressure on myself to build the fantasy church. And what I mean by that is, I think whenever we start a church or plant a church, many of us, maybe no one else, maybe it's just me, but we say that we're not looking to be the next Stephen Furtick, or insert your name in there, Hillsong or whatever your big name church is. We say, oh no, it's good. I'm just following God. I'm just obeying God. But I think there's something in the back of our mind that says, you know what, it'd be cool if. And I think we want to plant a fantasy church instead of what God has obediently asked us to fulfill and go after. And so I think I put a little bit too much pressure on myself to try to be the next whatever. I didn't mimic them. I didn't act like them. I was my unique self and what God had called me to be. But that internal pressure to perform, let's be honest, most of the large startup churches out there, and God bless you if you are one of them, but we are not. It's kind of 1% of the 1%ers. And so oftentimes we get very enamored by the very fast growing startup church plants. And that is so awesome. If you are, come to my church and tell me everything I need to change. That's cool. No, I probably wouldn't listen to half of them, because every one of us have a unique DNA that God has called us to be. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, understand that we all organically grow at different places, spaces, levels, and you got to figure out what God's called you to be. And don't worry about building your fantasy church, but rather build the church that God has called you uniquely to plant and build in the community He's called you to. That
sounds beautiful, but I was talking with a buddy of mine who was 6 months, maybe 5 months out from launch Sunday, and they were doing an ARC thing too.
Yeah.
And we were helping them with some mailers and some Facebook ads. And I remember I was golfing with my buddy, and we were talking about the church, and I asked him, I said, if at the peak this church has 100 people forever,
yeah,
what do you think? Does that, in your heart of hearts, does that mean that this failed and you try something else? Or in your heart of hearts, you're like, cool, that's what God has for me to help these people in their life, and that's what I'm going to do faithfully, and if that's what God has, then yay. And during the candid conversation, he was like, I would feel like I failed, and the cliche answer was, healthy things grow. And so it would continue to grow. And so I think that was a question that he wasn't expecting, so he was kind of processing it on the fly.
Yeah.
But then he came back to me a few months later. He's like, honest, I had to wrestle with that question for a long time. And do you feel like, in your heart of hearts, if your church never grows another person, and from now until Josh Mayo is 82 years old and you die, and you've lived your whole life just like that, do you feel satisfied or do you feel disappointed?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that you said there that I'd love to comment on. First of all, do I feel satisfied or disappointed? I think we all have this tension, this desire to grow, right? And so I don't think that there's a sense of being disappointed that we can't get to whatever next level. I don't think that's wrong. I don't think that equates to sinfulness or me lacking in my purpose. But for me, I have to define what is success. And for me, success is I love God, God loves me. Boom. That's success. And I have to define it that way. And I was going to say, when you asked your friend that question, I was like, ding, ding, ding on the nose. That's the question. Because I had to wrestle with that question a lot, and it's hard. But an illustration that I think was really helpful for me is whether I am the pilot of a plane of 10 people or I'm a pilot of a big Boeing jet that has 3,000 people in it. I'm still the pilot that God has asked me to get these people to a final destination in heaven, to be closer to Jesus, to build disciples. And so whether it's 10 people or 10,000 people, do I have to be faithfully obedient and do that well? Yes, absolutely. And I really do believe old school stuff that, faithfulness, obedience, that's what the Lord looks at. Because here's the thing, when you even hear the parable of the different talents, I think God gives a different measure to each person. And we don't know what our measure is, right? But we have to be faithful. And I'm going to push back. I've heard that phrase a lot. Healthy things grow. Healthy things grow. Yeah. That's right to an extent. Like there comes a point where if we're going to use that metaphor, and I've quoted that metaphor so many times, that symbolic picture, healthy things grow. Yes, they do. But weeds also grow, and they grow really fast. And oak trees grow, but they grow to a certain extent. And then everything has sometimes a growth capacity. And so we have to say, all right, am I at a healthy place? Do we need to shift things up to grow to a higher level? Or do I need to kind of be faithful at this season for a while and then kind of reassess? And sometimes I think the biggest thing that needs to be healthy and grow is our heart. And the reason maybe some of the external things aren't growing is because internally we haven't grown in a while. And so I just push back on the whole healthy things grow sometimes, because sometimes, yeah, they do grow, but some things that are not that good and not that healthy. Weeds grow very quickly. Oak trees grow to a certain extent. There is a stopping point. And sometimes it's healthy to assess and say, is this healthy growth? Because all throughout the Gospels as well, too, you see Jesus doing two things. He had surge seasons and he had purge seasons. And every one of us needs to have surge and purge, where sometimes the healthiest thing for your church to do is to lose some people. And that might not always sound politically correct, but it's incredibly important. It might be the healthiest thing for your church to grow, to get to the next level, is to lose some people that were there at the very beginning. And it's not that we want to. Our heart, we don't want to lose these people. I was the guy that said, I will never lose anybody on my launch team. They will be more than scaffolding. They'll stay with me forever. But sometimes things just change and people change. And I know I kind of said a lot there, but I looked at Jesus and he said, he said, are you offended? Will you leave me too? And Jesus had very large groups that sometimes would leave when he would say hard truth to help the church grow in a greater extent. And so just wrestle with that tension, I think, as you're talking through the growth question.
I think you're right. There's two ways to look at it. Growth, this whole thing is called Church Growth Nation, right?
Yeah.
And it's not always about numerical growth. Sometimes we need to grow in our walk with God, grow in our knowledge, grow in our maturity. And so that is obviously a little bit more cliche, but I acknowledge that is an area that we grow in. But when we talk about your heart's desire to grow in size, I think, so like our company's Vibrant Agency, and I have a desire for our company to grow and to be the best and to be bigger and all that stuff, right? But at the same time, I am completely satisfied. If I do this for the rest of my life, I am satisfied and hungry at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to grow our company because I'm dissatisfied. It's just because it's fun and it's like part of your DNA to try to accomplish a goal and be competitive and win. But that doesn't mean that it's fed from a place of dissatisfaction. And I think that that's where, if everybody can get to that point, like, I have a vision in my heart for my church to be 5,000 people and to reach all these numbers that you have. And we're going to go for that. But at the same time, if that's not what God has, I'm going to chase it because that's part of my DNA. And I think that that's fun. I think that's what I'm supposed to do. But if it doesn't, I'm not dissatisfied in the same time. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's not a problem to fix, but it's a tension to manage. And I think that's where things are for us. And I think the Apostle Paul, and kind of what I'm trying to describe is us making sure that we're not falling into either of the ruts on both sides of the road, right? I think both can be out of balance. The Apostle Paul talked about this idea of godliness with contentment is great gain, right? And so there's this contentment. Contentment actually brings about great gain. There's a little bit of a tension there. It's like, wait, I'm supposed to be content, but I have great gain at the same time. But then the Apostle Paul also says, I press on, right? He kept forgetting what's the past, and I move forward. And so I think as pastors, and I don't know how to do it very well, but I'm working on it because I want to grow, but I want to be everything that God's called me to be in the season that I'm at as well too. I want to be fully present. So help me to understand, God, how godliness with contentment is great gain, but help me to also press on. Help me to balance that tension a little bit.